Okay, so we know this is a fantastic Malin's lone pine, and this photograph was taken back in 2015. And you'll notice that it's really a very lush, wide, large tree. And I thought, sandy Swan coastal plain, how does it compare with other ones around Perth and further afield? So I reckon that's where we should have started. So this is the view from the rise, and looking out towards Guildford Road, and it's a wide angle one because it's a very large tree, so the monument might fall over, I assure you. And the plaque has R.F. Lingard was the president of the Malin sub-branch of the RSL, and he planted that in Anzac Day in 1970, and it says grown from seed lone pine Gallipoli. Now we're looking across from Guildford Road. You'll see a lovely hedge, all beautifully manicured there. Again, looking towards the rise, it's a big, marvellous tree. It's a little bit different now, so we'll come back to it later on. Now, this is the generally accepted stories are that two cones came back from Gallipoli in 1915, and on the left we've got the story of Sergeant Keith McDowell, and he collected a pine cone from Pinus brutea. So these are about 100 different Pinus species of pines in the Northern Hemisphere. So this particular pine is native to the Gallipoli area. And he brought it back to home to Warrnambool, and his Aunt Emma in 1930 managed to grow 4 seedlings. And one of these seedlings was planted at the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne in 1933. And then later on, the seeds were propagated by the Melbourne Legacy. Now, over in New South Wales, Lance Corporal Benjamin Smith, he actually collected a different pine cone. And this one came from the trenches. The Turkish trenches were covered with branches that had been brought from other areas. And this particular species, Pinus haleopenensis, I've called it a Mediterranean pine, because this pine actually grows right across the Mediterranean to Spain along the northern African coast. So his cone came home to Inverell, and his mother managed to grow 2 seedlings in 1931. So there are 6 seedlings. Ben Smith's cone, one of the 2, was planted in Canberra in 1934. And these seeds from the seedlings, now this is a crucial part, they are seedlings, cones from the seedlings, propagated by Yarralumla Nursery, which apparently is a very famous one in Canberra, and some grafts were done by CSIRO. And so I kind of wondered, where does our pine fit into this story? But nonetheless, I thought, well, how does ours compare? And I took a trip various places over the last few years having a look. So Black Boy Hill in Greenock was where they had an army camp training the young lads. And there are various signs there, so I've chosen one sign. There's a lot of different sort of stories, as I say, as we go through. And you'll notice this one's a Canary Island pine, which was the pine we just saw behind here. And this is a photograph of a lone pine at Gallipoli, the site. But in fact, during the war, that pine tree got demolished. And the Turks in 1920 planted another pine tree. This one is Pinus pineus, which is a stone pine. As I said, there are about 100 different species of these guys. And that one was planted in 1969. Now in 1968, at Binnu Primary School, anybody know where Binnu is? There you go. Just off the main road up north of Geraldton, about 20 kilometres short of the turn off to Kalbarri, there's a railway siding, a silo, and if you go one block to the east, you'll find this marvellous primary school. So the students here have planted this fantastic tree, and they've got beautiful landscaping and gardens at this primary school, and that was in 1968. We've got the, again, this tree is a seedling of lone pine of Anzac, after which the battle was named. It is in fact a seedling from a seedling. Follow? There was just only 6 seedlings from 2 cones, and they grew up in Melbourne and in Canberra, and then they took seedlings from the cones off those original seedlings. But you only have a small park, so we won't be too sort of tedious about it. It gives you a general idea. Now, down in Albany at Mount Clarence, this one was planted in 1974. As you can see, it's kind of a little bit straggly and struggling. At this time in 2015, some locals thought, oh, they should just take it out, it's terrible. And other people, no, you can't do that. And I'll just quickly put it's a very large label, but again, we've got that photograph of the Gallipoli site. It gives a little bit of the rundown of the story of Smith and McDowell, and there's six original seedlings. Now this one was just taken a few months ago, and it's beautifully growing lush, so somebody now is nurturing and looking after it. Yeah. Just as the 2 women, the aunt and the mother, nurtured those seedlings for us now to have them all around the country. Now, I may have been struggling up there on Mount Clarence, so in 2012, Albany put in a lone pine grove down on the foreshore, down the bottom of the main street, York Street, at the Anzac Peace Park. And it's in a beautiful location. They've really developed that port area down there. So it's down on Princess Charlotte Harbour. And of course, New Zealand has lots of lone pines also. But they're mostly the canary pine and Pinus radiata, which goes into our newspapers. Now this is the grove, there's 3 of them, and they look back to Mount Clarence. So that was that one that was struggling a bit. So they've now put their money on having 3. Not quite lone pines, but it's a lone pine grove. And Mount Clarence looks out to the west, across the entrance to the next. So we're on Mount Clarence here, looking across to Porrinup, the old quarantine station. And this area here, spend a bit of time on this one. In 1985, Turkey officially named Anzac Cove, so it's Anzac Koya in Turkish. So on the coast, we've got an Anzac name written down. And then Australia actually put a name to this entrance from King George Sound into Princess Charlotte Harbour, and that's now Ataturk entrance. And you're not familiar with what happened back down there in 1914, there were about 40 ships assembled out on King George Sound, where all the New Zealanders and the Australians came together to form the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, ANZAC. So they sailed off, so hopefully they thought they were going to France or Germany or London. Or they went off in November 1914. Now the quarantine station here, in amongst the woodland here, not about here, there's another lone pine. This one was planted in 1994. And the plaque on this particular one, it's this one here if it's trying to get some sunlight. It's quite a atmospheric little area actually. And the plaque down here has the word descended from. That's a good way to put it. RSLs also grew lone pine. So this is the one at Pinjarra, which is they're a very strong group down there, one feels. So this was planted in 1992. Now back to Perth, we have one in Kings Park. And this particular one is quite recent, so that was planted in 2005. And the governor at the time and some students from Rossmoyne Senior High School planted this particular one. So the Pinus haleopenensis, generally called the Aleppo pine, so there's a lot of those. So it's always a little bit better to be using the scientific name, even though some scientists quibble about things and change things, like dryandras are no longer dryandras, they're Inverthanxias and that sort of thing. Now let's go out into the outback. And Murchison Settlement, are people familiar with Murchison Settlement? It's the only local government area in Western Australia without a town. So if you go south for 200 kilometres, you might eventually come to Mullewa, and then 100 kilometres across west to Geraldton. And if you go about 200 kilometres to the north, you come to Gascoyne Junction. This lovely little settlement only has about a couple of dozen residents there, and two of those people look after their wonderful little lone pine. And this was planted in 2015, the 100th anniversary. And they've got local stone here with the plaque for this particular one. And you'll notice the reticulation system and the fence around here to keep up the wildlife, kangaroos and etc. And you can see little weeds growing well, so it's well looked after. So as opposed to Geraldton, they planted one back in 1970, hasn't survived, at Birdwood House, RSL. Theirs hasn't survived. And this is only a very small part of what they set up in 2015. Again, I put the word descendant, which is very good. And it actually sits back down. There it is there, the little green patch, and the plaque behind it. And they've put a very, very nice little area here together, and of course, lest we forget. And Marie-Louise said, oh, that's a sunset, and it is. It's throwing the shade at sunset. So, that was the second one. That was the second one. Yep, Black Boy Hill, that was planted in 1969. And I think, in fact, there might have been 2 plantings. Some cities, they've got a few signs up there, and there's a bit of a contradiction. I'm trying to simplify it with just a little bit of a breeze through here. But to me, the lone pine as a lone pine is the crucial part. So let's return to Guildford Road. And at Bazanine, they relocated their war monument in 2015, the same day as the people of Murchison Settlement were dedicating theirs. And what have they got? A Norfolk pine. Hey! Southern Hemisphere Araucarian, related to the Willamai pine and hoop pine and monkey puzzle. So I rather like theirs. And there it is, Guildford Road and Wilson Street, sitting there all beautifully lined up. And then we come back to Maylands. Now, here we go. Get to the nitty-gritty here. This was only taken a few months ago. And you'll see that it's not quite as robust as it was. It's had a little bit of trimming. And there was a sort of a trimmed hedge before. They used to trim it down. Now it's sort of a wild sort of free-form prostrate plants along there. And we'll have a closer look at the plaque at ours. Grown from seed, lone pine Gallipoli, planted by R.F. Lingard, President Maylands sub-branch, 26th of April 1970. Now there's a bit of a mystery attached to all of this. We shall go into it. But this is again much the same place, and it still hasn't fallen over, looking a bit of a lean, but much more airy because they've actually chopped a little bit out of it there. So I'll just go for a bit of a spiel on the. I need to sort of get the right words here so I don't kind of put too much emphasis in the wrong place. So, yeah. Now, momentous events with the telling and retelling over time can lead to myths, legends and indeed mysteries. Local stories, including in a book and a newspaper clipping, has Frank, maybe Bob, collecting seed at the time of the Gallipoli campaign. Now, the archives of the State RSL in Perth has 3 pieces of correspondence with Maylands RSL dated the 11th and 24th of March and 3rd of April 1970. So I've got the right year. R.F. Lingard is president at the top of the letterheads, and on the 3rd of April 1970, Maylands secretary, Mr. Lawton, thanks the State Secretary, Mr. Bruce, quote, "Thank you for taking seedling to Shire Nursery," unquote. Now, my thanks goes to John's brilliant research, taking me back to the 19th century, and also I've got to thank Marie-Louise for patiently setting up this 21st century PowerPoint for me. Now, John found that Reginald Frank Lingard was born in mid-1898 in England. In mid-1916, having turned 18, joined the English Army Reserve, and he was mobilised in March 1917. Time and place doesn't seem to compute here. And he came to Australia in 1926. He in fact he served in the Australian Army in World War II as a warrant officer. Now, Lingard was a career gardener, so we can be extra grateful for his part in nurturing a wonderful lone pine. Roger has also, thank you, pointed out that there is a rose flower themed stained glass window at St Luke's Church, Maylands, as the Lingard bequest acknowledging his community good works. Now we'll go back to the lone pines that we did a little bit of a trip around the state. There were 5 around about the 50th anniversary: 1968 Binu, 1969 Black Boy Hill, 1970 Geraldton, didn't survive, 1970 Maylands, 1974 Mount Clarence. And there were about 2 around about the 75th anniversary: 1992 Pinjarra, 1994 Coroner. And there were 4 more recent ones leading up to the 100th anniversary. So 2005 Kings Park, 2012 Lone Pine Grove, Albany, and in 2015 Murchison Settlement and Bassendean. Now Maylands is amongst the first, flush of seedlings planted in WA. There may be more. If anybody knows any more, it'd be really interesting to know. Now amongst a unique group is, and ours are amongst a unique group, is quarantine restrictions now prohibit any seedling being brought into WA from interstate. So you can't do that anymore. And to finish, I found a lovely quote here. So these findings don't affect the various lone pine memorial trees' symbolic significance. Regardless of species or location, the trees stand as a commemoration of lives lost, of the bond between Australia and New Zealand, and a symbol of friendship between the Australian and Turkish people. As we pause and reflect in remembrance, lest we forget.
Thanks, Kris. I grew up in a town called Puckapunya, just north of Melbourne, and I lived in a street called Lone Pine Crescent. I was about 4 and 5 years old, and just Lone Pine Crescent. So that, every time I've heard about the Lone Pine, it's meant something to me, and I had to go on. And you filled in so much information that I just took for granted. I think most of us would as well.
Well, there's one apparently in East Timor.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the stories go on. I mean, Benjamin Smith there, Benjamin Robert Smith, you know about Mason?
Yes.
His first station where he trained was actually Lone Pine Barracks, Singleton. So this Lone Pines mean a lot to New Zealand and Australia. So it's it's now, the original monuments here were to the lads that never came back in the First World War, and the local people felt this very deeply, and so there was this. It's kind of a bit heart-wrenching to find the stories behind all the stories. I mean, there's literally tens of thousands of stories, but I did try to find if there were any on our monument that served and died at Lone Pine. So I found a name, but he doesn't come into it. It's a Shannon Lovelady. She's done a collation of the Gallipoli dead, and he doesn't appear on her list. He appears on our list because he's next of kin, a couple of blocks away. So his father would have put his on the list. And another one at that time, Lone Pine was in fact a diversionary tactic, and it wasn't really meant to be a strategic thing in itself. So the bigger picture, there's another lad, he died a little bit further north of Lone Pine, but at the same time as this other fellow. So, and when you look at the next of kin for both of those, and I haven't really gone into a lot of history of the war, but just to see the correspondence going backwards and forwards, and you could feel it's heart-wrenching to actually read of trying to get information or sorting things out. And one of the lads, in fact, was an orphan. And so, yeah, there's just so many stories. And it was, Lone Pine was absolutely devastating, that whole operation, and even in the big picture. So we all know that. So, and it's now not just this is the Lone Pine now is is a focus point for all people to serve now, not just those who didn't come back. Yeah, yeah. So anyway.
And that's wonderful because you've actually, through that research you've done, putting that all together in one place, and that's really, really rich. Thank you so very much for that work. And it hasn't just been done over a little time. I know that you've been researching this, and it's sort of something that's grown like a seed, in fact.
It has indeed, yes. I mean, originally, there were 2 or 3 that I found in the last few years, so that first look in 2015, I missed that one at Pouring Up. It was hiding.
It could be that you haven't finished yet.
No, that's it. This is only what I've kind of found along the way, and so, yes, when I go through a town now, I'm like, oh, there's a pine tree.
Kris, look out, there might be a book coming.
Oh, I don't know. No, there's too many books on Gallipoli.
So, thank you very much. Great big applause.